The morning my wife Emily kissed me goodbye, she smiled with the same warmth that had fooled me for almost 12 years. She rolled her silver suitcase toward the front door, adjusted the expensive scarf I had bought her on our anniversary, and reminded me that her company had sent her to Chicago for a 3-day business conference. "Don't stay up too late working," she laughed before wrapping her arms around my neck. I smiled back because that was exactly what she expected me to do. The moment her rideshare disappeared around the corner, I walked inside, locked the front door, and opened the envelope that had arrived anonymously 2 nights earlier. Inside were 4 photographs, a hotel reservation confirmation, and one handwritten sentence that changed everything. She's not going to Chicago for business. For 48 hours, I had convinced myself the pictures had to be fake, but something deep inside me already knew the truth. My wife wasn't leaving for a conference. She was leaving for another man. The evidence became impossible to ignore once I started paying attention. Emily had become protective of her phone months earlier, flipping it over whenever I entered the room. She suddenly needed evening team meetings, expensive dresses she claimed were office appropriate, and perfume she never wore around me. Looking back, every strange excuse fit together like pieces of a puzzle I had been too trusting to solve. The hotel reservation in the envelope wasn't in Chicago at all. It was for the Grand Monarch Resort, one of the most luxurious hotels only 40 minutes outside our city. Even worse, the reservation listed 2 guests under the name of her company CEO, Daniel Carter. I knew Daniel. We'd met twice at company parties. He was married, successful, respected, and always spoke about family values. I wanted to confront Emily immediately, but anger wasn't enough anymore. I needed certainty, and once I had it, I wanted the truth exposed in a way neither of them could escape. Instead of following Emily alone, I made one phone call that would change their lives forever. Daniel's wife, Rebecca, answered after the 3rd ring. She sounded surprised when I introduced myself, because we barely knew each other. I apologized for calling out of nowhere, and asked if we could meet somewhere private, because I believed our spouses were hiding something from both of us. At first, she almost hung up, assuming I was some kind of bitter husband chasing rumors. Then I mentioned the Grand Monarch Resort and the reservation number from the anonymous envelope. The silence that followed lasted almost 20 seconds. Finally, she whispered, "Daniel told me he was flying to New York this morning." We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop before driving to the hotel together. When I arrived, Rebecca looked exhausted, as though she hadn't slept all night. Without saying a word, I slid the photographs across the table. She stared at them, her hands trembling so badly that she nearly dropped her coffee. Tears filled her eyes, but instead of breaking down, she looked at me with quiet determination. "Let's finish this today." The drive to the Grand Monarch felt longer than it really was. Neither of us spoke much because there was nothing left to say. Every mile brought us closer to the moment that would either destroy the anonymous accusation forever or confirm our worst fears. I kept replaying every memory of my marriage inside my head. Our wedding day, buying our first house, celebrating birthdays, comforting each other through difficult times. I wondered how many of those memories had been genuine for Emily and how many had simply been performances. Rebecca stared out the passenger window almost the entire drive, gripping her wedding ring so tightly that the skin around her finger turned white. When an enormous hotel finally appeared beyond the trees, its glass entrance sparkling under the afternoon sun, neither of us felt impressed by its beauty. To us, it looked more like a crime scene waiting to reveal its evidence. Inside the lobby, luxury surrounded us. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors, while guests laughed over champagne, completely unaware that 2 marriages were about to collapse beneath the same roof. I approached the reception desk calmly and asked whether Mrs. Emily Lawson had already checked in. The receptionist smiled politely but refused to provide guest information. Before I could respond, Rebecca quietly stepped forward and showed her identification. "My husband is Daniel Carter," she said softly. The receptionist's expression changed instantly. She didn't answer directly, but the brief panic in her eyes told us everything we needed to know. Moments later, I noticed the elevator doors opening across the lobby. Emily stepped out first, laughing freely, her hand resting comfortably on Daniel's arm. Neither of them had any idea we were standing only a few feet away. For the first time in months, I didn't feel rage. I felt complete clarity. Emily froze the instant she saw me. The color drained from her face so quickly that she looked like she might collapse. Daniel's confident smile disappeared just as fast when his eyes met Rebecca's. The cheerful conversation they had been sharing vanished into suffocating silence. Guests walking to the lobby slowed down, sensing something dramatic unfolding. Without raising my voice, I reached into my briefcase and removed a neatly prepared envelope. I stepped toward Emily until only a few feet separated us. She opened her mouth, searching desperately for an explanation, but I simply held out the documents. "You won't need to pretend anymore," I said calmly. "These are your divorce papers." She stared at the envelope without touching it, while Daniel turned toward Rebecca, only to realize she had already removed her wedding ring. At that exact moment, the hotel room door behind them slowly opened, and someone unexpected stepped into the hallway. The person who stepped into the hallway was not another hotel guest. It was the private investigator whose business card had been tucked inside the anonymous envelope I had received days earlier. He looked directly at me, gave a slight nod, and then turned toward Daniel and Emily. "I believe my job here is finished," he said calmly. "Everything requested by my client has now been witnessed in person." Daniel's face twisted with confusion. "Your client?" he demanded. The investigator reached into his briefcase and handed Rebecca a thick folder filled with photographs, hotel records, restaurant receipts, flight cancellations, and weeks of surveillance reports. Rebecca slowly flipped through the pages, and every new piece of evidence shattered another excuse before it could even be spoken. Emily finally grabbed my arm, her voice trembling. "Please, this isn't what it looks like." I gently pulled my arm away. "That's the problem, Emily," I replied. "It's exactly what it looks like." For several seconds, nobody moved. The elegant hallway had become painfully silent, except for the distant sound of the hotel's piano drifting up from the lobby below. Daniel suddenly tried to regain control. He straightened his jacket and forced a nervous laugh. "You're making a mistake," he said. "We were only here discussing a confidential business acquisition. The company booked one suite because we were reviewing sensitive documents." Even he didn't sound convinced by his own explanation. Rebecca calmly lifted one photograph from the investigator's file. It showed Daniel and Emily embracing on a beach during what he claimed was another business conference nearly 4 months earlier. Another photo showed them holding hands outside an expensive restaurant hundreds of miles away. Then came hotel invoices, matching airline tickets, and copies of messages confirming romantic weekend getaways. Daniel's shoulders slumped as every lie collapsed under the weight of undeniable proof. Emily looked at him, hoping he would somehow save them both, but for the first time, he couldn't save even himself. Emily burst into tears and reached toward me again. "Please, let me explain," she whispered. "It started as a mistake. I never wanted this to happen." I stared into the eyes of the woman I had trusted with my entire future and realized something surprising. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. "A mistake happens once," I answered quietly. "This took planning. You packed your suitcase, kissed me goodbye, lied to my face, and checked into a luxury hotel with another man. None of that was an accident." She lowered her head, unable to argue. Daniel finally admitted the truth in a defeated voice. Their affair had lasted almost a year. Every so-called conference, every unexpected meeting, and every late-night office emergency had been another opportunity to spend time together. Hearing the confession hurt, but it also brought an unexpected sense of peace. The questions that had haunted me for months finally had answers. Rebecca surprised everyone by remaining completely composed. She removed a second envelope from her handbag and handed it directly to Daniel. "I met my attorney yesterday," she said. "These are divorce papers, along with notice that our joint accounts have already been frozen under temporary court orders." Daniel's expression changed from guilt to panic. "Rebecca, don't do this," he pleaded. "We can work this out." She simply shook her head. "You had dozens of chances to stop before today." Meanwhile, I informed Emily that I had spent the previous week protecting my own future. Our shared bank accounts had been legally separated. My personal investments transferred into accounts she couldn't access, and the house was already scheduled for appraisal as part of the divorce process. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She had assumed I would react emotionally and make careless decisions. Instead, I had quietly prepared for the moment she never believed would come. The consequences reached far beyond our marriages. The affair became impossible for Daniel's company to ignore. Several hotel guests had recorded parts of the confrontation, and within hours, short videos began spreading across social media. By the following morning, the company's board demanded an emergency meeting after learning that corporate expense accounts had allegedly funded many of Daniel's secret trips. An internal investigation uncovered months of questionable reimbursements, falsified travel reports, and misuse of company resources. Daniel was placed on immediate administrative leave, while financial auditors examined every expense connected to his business travel. Emily's position also became impossible to defend because many of the records showed she had knowingly participated in submitting false expense claims. The relationship they believed would remain hidden behind luxury hotels and business excuses was now unraveling in front of co-workers, executives, lawyers, and eventually the public. 3 months later, my life looked completely different. The divorce had been finalized without unnecessary drama because the evidence left little room for dispute. I sold the house that had once been filled with memories I no longer wanted to revisit and moved into a quiet lakefront home where every morning felt like a fresh beginning instead of another reminder of betrayal. Therapy helped me rebuild the confidence I had nearly lost, while time slowly replaced anger with acceptance. Rebecca and I stayed in occasional contact, not because tragedy had created romance, but because surviving the same heartbreak had created genuine friendship. Sometimes healing doesn't come from revenge. It comes from discovering that another honest person understands exactly what you've lived through. We encourage each other to keep moving forward instead of remaining trapped in the worst chapter of our lives. Nearly a year after that afternoon at the Grand Monarch, I received an unexpected email from Emily. It wasn't filled with excuses this time. She admitted that she had mistaken excitement for love, secrecy for passion, and lies for freedom. She wrote that losing everything had finally forced her to confront the person she had become. I read every word carefully before quietly deleting the message. Some apologies arrive long after they've stopped mattering. They don't erase betrayal, rebuild trust, or restore the years that were wasted. As I closed my laptop and looked across the calm water outside my window, I realized I no longer needed revenge, explanations, or closure from her. The greatest victory wasn't watching her world fall apart outside that hotel room. It was realizing that while she had been busy destroying our marriage with deception, I had unknowingly been building a future she would never be part of. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't anger at all. It's walking away with your dignity, your peace, and the certainty that the best chapters of your life are still waiting to be written.